Okay, good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
And good morning and afternoon to everyone who's listening into this. So, we recorded a conversation for the first time in a long time, a little while back, on metaphysics and the kind of metaphysical journey you've made throughout your life, and then particularly over the past several years of working on Soul Story and this latest project. I think that went quite well, but there's only so much metaphysics I can take in the space of an hour. So I had to stop it at some point before my brain melted down entirely. So we're back to pick up where we took off. Before getting into that, it's a big month for you, or it's the lead up to a big month for you, because after 8 years of not publishing anything, the longest period in your writing career, you are now right on the verge of releasing your latest project, which I believe is coming out on the 1st of May, 2025. So why don't you start by telling us a bit about what we're in store for there?
Yes, so that is quite a big deal for me because it has been a very, very long, intense time, and I can't believe it's actually arriving. That it'll happen, and it's something different. I've called it a pod book, which is a cross between the kind of clarity of a book and the personal connection of a podcast. So it's going to be free. It'll be available on YouTube. It'll be available from podcast providers in audio form. And it will launch on the 1st of May, and then it will just carry on as new chapters come out over the following year, most likely. And it is an extension of Soul Story, which goes much wider and much deeper. So that's everything from physics to God, from the purpose of life to the survival of death. It's my chance to share everything from the journey we've been discussing, really. And you know, if tomorrow is my 66th birthday, and I officially in the UK I become an old age pensioner. I get my pension, which feels unbelievable to have reached that stage in life. But the compensation for that is that I do feel this is by far the best work I've ever done, by quite a long way. And it's a delight to just give it out there and give it away free. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying, look, this will come out week by week, like a Netflix series or something. And if people want access to all the chapters I've recorded, because I've recorded a few in advance, they can join my online community, the ICU, which again is something which people join. You put your own fee on that because it's not a fee, it's a donation. It's like, I want to support you, so you can join that, and then you get access to all of them. So if you want the whole lot straight away, you can get that as well. And I'm hoping that it will start a discussion of the ideas, and I look forward to seeing how people respond.
Okay, great. I'll loop back round to ask about the ICU at the end, and also we'll mention, I think you've just announced a retreat, haven't you? So
Yes. Well, I haven't been doing any retreats, as you well know. We've met together at many of these experiential events over the years, a long time. I've done that regularly throughout the world for decades. But I've stopped to concentrate on this pod book because it's taken all of my attention, and I'm still not going to do one for a while. But in October, I'm going to do a new retreat, which will be building on the philosophy in the pod book and the practices, because the pod book is mainly philosophy, and that's a great way to get philosophy, is in conversations like this or in me presenting like in the pod book. But the experiential side, it's better to get it like in the online in the ICU, or even better, the experiential events. And we can maybe discuss this, what this means, as it may come up later. But I've called it something new. I've called this learning how to psi-sense, because I've developed this idea of the psyche as a sense, as a way of understanding what spiritual experience, how spiritual experience is possible, which is a fascinating question that I've not really asked myself up until the last 5 or 6 years. So the new retreat, which is in October in Glastonbury, will be learn how to psi-sense. And it's still about coming into that awakened state together and experiencing that big love and that profound oneness and touching what would be called God, that greater intelligence. But the way that I want to couch it has moved on in the light of the new philosophy.
Okay, I'm actually just going to roll with that, sort of abandon my plan to just roll into that slightly. I think, and I think you might agree, that kind of an acid test for any philosophy or theory about life would be the work it does in the world. Okay, and I'm wondering how you're noticing in your own internal experience and what you're seeing with others in terms of when you shift the ideas out of this framework of a kind of classical idealism or theism into what the ideas you develop now, how that's, if it has shifted your inner experience in a different way.
Yes, great question. Yes, is the answer, as it has, and I've seen the knock on from that as well in the people that have been exploring it with me. So I would say, how would I describe it? So there there is something, if I come into the state I would have talked about when I was doing lucid living, which I can still do, then the essence of it is that I'm experience myself as this abstract presence within which this is arising like a dream. So that what I really am is on the outside. It's a kind of a, has no particular qualities, it's just conscious. And then within it there's all these forms, of which Tim is one. It's what I appear to be. Now I was never against Tim, I was never against the individual, I always wanted to emphasize that. So I didn't have that horrible non-dual, no self, deny your reality thing going. But nevertheless, that was an apparent thing, and this is what I am. That was the idea of the real self. What's happened now is that that's gone. And if I come into the thing I'm exploring now, I would say that there's a process of becoming, which is one undifferentiated being arising as everything, including Tim and Richard and everything else. And so I feel completely, first of all, there's even more emphasis now on Tim, so, or Richard, or the individual, because that's what you are. It's not your appearance, it's not an apparent self, that's you. It's right back to that common sense idea. Of course, that's you, but you're something that is arising on these different levels and are embedded within this oneness. And as you get that, that's the univigil, the individual conscious of unity. There's the profound sense of communion. That's the word I chose, with union, where there's a kind of, there's a intimate connectivity with everything and everyone. So in that way, it's quite similar, but there's a shift. I don't know if I could get that across, that there's no sense of being something other than Tim, but rather there's a profound sense of everything is one essence arising as all of this. And then it's about reaching up to the more emergent levels of that, where Tim connects with something greater than Tim, which is also emerging as the oneness takes more emergent forms, and that feels that's very profound, because what happened was I started downplaying that during my lucid living idealist phase, because I couldn't make sense of the old idea of God, this kind of so it lost that to a large degree because it became abstract. It became just a pure consciousness. It wasn't a benign, loving being. It was just an abstract consciousness. And that was because the old idea of God as a creator, or even the dreamer of the dream, didn't really make much sense for all sorts of reasons we can discuss. And so I lost that. But then with this flip of going, oh no, that is what I experience. Actually, I experience a greater system, a greater being than myself, a super system, let's call it, something greater than me. And I think that's real. It's just, it's not where it's coming from. It's the most emergent thing that's arising in the process of becoming. So I got that back. So there was a moment, I can't remember if we mentioned this last time, where I did that thing you do sometimes where I said something out loud that was in my head, kind of quite loudly. And I remember just going suddenly, in a public place actually, just suddenly going, God's back. And it was like a moment of, oh, right, I can now relate to this again. And that was wonderful, because that's a beautiful love affair that I had before, which kind of died off when I went for this much more kind of oneness orientated only idealist perspective. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does make sense. It's interesting to me because when you describe that theistic vision falling away as your work progressed in the idealist paradigm, I hadn't really realized that was going on for you when I was doing retreats and things back 10, 15 years ago. And I think as I've grown older, I've become more aware of my own, say, Christian assumptions that I would have brought in to that Eastern work. And that's been something that it's been very hard for me to step outside of and get behind and look at because they're so embedded. Like the idea of this consciousness we're relating to as being God in some way, and the God that's there in the book of Genesis in some way, is something that I found very hard to question within myself. Not the Jesus stuff so much, actually. I found that, oh, okay, he wasn't, a man, he's a myth, and that makes sense in these ways. That's fine. But the more fundamental basis for the whole universe in that sense, I've noticed that as it's been a challenging thing to even step outside of and see, oh, that's an ideation. That's a particular way I formed through culture of looking at the universe, which is so foundational that it's hard for me to see through. So it's interesting to hear you say that. So if I'm hearing it right, there's a movement away from this almost reification of the witnessing awareness, or the sense that that awareness which witnesses is the truest part of you, and it's a more true part than the thoughts arising in mind or the body.
Beautifully put. That's the key. The reification of the witness, of the witness, not as something, not as me, Tim, witnessing myself, but as something separate from Tim, which is the witness. And that's I would say, is a beautiful way of putting what I take to be my error now.
Okay, I personally find something compelling about this, the almost sheer logic of the argument, as well as the experience, that the part of us which witnesses must in some sense be the most core part, in the sense of, okay, so I thought of an analogy, it might not be perfect, but with, like, if you consider a film set, okay, and you might have action films or horrors or comedies, and there might be different actors come and go on film sets, and they might be silent movies in the 1920s or modern special effects productions today, but in all of them you have a camera, and the camera is in some way the thing that is absolutely necessitated. Like, even if the actors didn't turn up, you could grab people off the street, but no camera, no film, because the camera is the thing that is witnessing. So that's got to be the continuous presence. And the bit you don't see, unless it's maybe caught in a reflection or another camera spots it in the film, where they make a mistake that way. So drawing that over as an analogy, then it's always kind of made sense to me of like, oh yeah, well, the thing that is most core about me must be the thing that looks at everything else, because what else could it be? So is that a position that you have rejected, or is that in some way compatible with what you're saying? Because I think that's a common kind of position that people into Advaita and such things almost reason themselves into, or touch and see as, oh, this is really self-evident. I must be the witness. That must be the central thing. So what would you say about that now from where you're at?
I'm completely wrong, and needs to be pushed. And so I would say that the analogy doesn't really work. Actually, it's because this idea that you're the conscious bit doesn't. I think is the wrong assumption. It's like you're the whole thing. You're the whole thing. And you take things in unconsciously, you take things in consciously. You're not something which is only... If you couldn't be conscious, if you couldn't witness, you wouldn't know that you exist, you wouldn't know anything, obviously. So the fact that you are, as a human being, you are able to be conscious is massively important. But that doesn't mean there's a separate thing which is conscious. You're conscious. And then you're unconscious, you're as well, but it's still you. Now, you don't know that if you're unconscious, but when you're conscious, you do know you exist. And you're taking in information from the world, and you're looking at yourself, and you're doing that all the time. And it's not like there's some separate bit which does that. You do that. The whole of you does that. You know, the fact that I can touch my hand doesn't mean there's a toucher as well as my hand. My hand is touching my other hand. I'm the object and the subject of this touching. And so this reification, as you put it perfectly, this making of a thing out of something which isn't a thing, it's a process. I witness myself. I witness the world. You know, I'm conscious of things. I take information in, and I recognize that I do, rather than there's a thing called consciousness, which is the camera, or as you, in your analogy, it's like, no, it's the whole you. It's and everything about you is integrated into one system, where system just means a integrated whole.
So is that putting a sense of this notion of an I at the center of a person's being?
No. Well, sorry, which way? I don't know whether you meant that as what I was saying or the other way around. So
no, not in the sense of an eye as in a thing that looks. A sense of like you were talking about, like it's not that there is a witness; it's that I witness. It's that I touch. So there's a sense of a you, a person there.
No, I think it's about how we understand identity. So when the neo-Advaitists say, "Look, there is no I," my problem with that is more, what is this I that you're denying? Because I think I might deny it as well. You know, if you're going, there's no separate I, which is you, it's like, well, I don't know what that would be anymore. What I'm saying is that you're an evolving, to go back to the thing we talked about earlier, there's a oneness, an undifferentiated oneness, which exists. Let's just call it being for that reason. It's differentiating into everything and has reached these high levels of emergence. And your identity, that's the key question, identity. What makes Richard the same Richard I spoke to before, given that loads of things have changed, biologically you've changed, all that sort of thing? It's that there's a continuation of one process of forming. Now, it's all one process of forming, one process of becoming, but it's like the tree of becoming has branches, and you're one, and I'm one. And the fact that there's this continuation of this process is what makes you you. And that process is your past. Everything that's formed about you has formed. That's who you are. You are the relationship of this system with the universe. And that is the thing which is conscious. That is the thing which is reflecting now. That is the thing which is everything you ever do. Is that. That's identity. It's not, there's not some different thing or some separate thing or some I thing. That's you. And you're that oneness as Richard on this journey of becoming.
Okay. So in the sense, I suppose one of the ways that Advaita and Zen spoke to me 25 years ago was I carried around a unconscious perception that there was an I in my head somewhere, and that chain of thoughts, somewhere there was a little crystallized atom that was me, that those thoughts were emerging from. And I actually spontaneously started to question that. It was something about becoming 18 years old and ostensibly an adult, and recognizing that all those thought patterns were different to when I was 5 years old, but there was something that felt consistent. And what is that then? And then these perennial philosophies spoke to me on that there isn't this crystallized I somewhere floating in your head.
Like the homunculus inside you, that idea.
I can't like reach in and take it out and go, there's me, and put it back in. So you're not disputing.
I agree with that.
You agree with that. It's just then you go in a different direction from where Advaita would take that.
Yes. And what I see with everything really is that we sense and make sense of existence with these categories we call ideas, and that we head off in one direction and then it ends up setting up all sorts of crazy nonsense because we've gone in that one direction. So we end up needing to, we went in a direction for historical reasons where you had the idea of the homunculus or of the soul. Often it's like, you know, you're a soul that's essentially you. The thing with Descartes, where you suddenly had what Gilbert Ryle in his book, which eludes me now, in the last century, he coined the phrase "the ghost in the machine." That idea, as a way of dealing with a mechanical universe where everything just obeys these mechanical laws, and you must be free because otherwise it's all mechanical, and all of those ideas. So that's gone now. Now that the ghost is, there's no ghost, there's just machine for science, I think. But the idea is still that there's something which is a unus, which is inside. Whereas for me, it's like, what I want to do is go, no, we're done with that. Let's take what we've understood from the scientific worldview, but let's not make it all a machine. Let's see this process of creative emergence, which has gone on to the levels of psyche or soul and then on to God, whereby the more emergent can't be reduced to the less emergent. That's the whole point. It's more than. Every moment actually is more than the past. And that enables us then to make sense of all these spiritual ideas and spiritual experiences without all of the confusion caused by going down these dead ends.
Okay, before I move on from this, I just want to loop back round and pick up again about the difference this makes to experience.
Okay.
Okay, I think there's a little bit more to mind there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that your one way to capture your work on the perennial philosophy and on people having these experiences is that the way we conceptualize matters. Okay,
Yes.
it's not an irrelevance how we talk about this. And if you come into this kind of inner exploration, this psychonautic activity with bad concepts, it's going to have a bad result. And the more clear we can be about that, the better. And I think that's very, very apparent from the feedback you will have received on your work from seminars of people coming in who feel stuck in some way in a very detached, Zen-like place of the world, where there is a kind of depersonalization maybe going on, because there is a framework that has set them up to experience a cold kind of detachment into a witnessing awareness where the world is just passing by and they don't have any great interest in it. And you've emphasized like both and a kind of reintegration. And I think you will have had a lot of feedback over the years about people stepping out of that detachment into a more integrated and balanced way of living where they embrace both poles of their being. So I'm interested then to say, okay, it sounds like the work you've done now, you're saying that's accentuated that journey for people. So maybe you could say just a bit more about your personal experience about this sort of reintegration of this theistic concept with it, and also the feedback you've received from people for whom this seems to have really worked. This seems to have landed well, and it's accentuated that journey further for them.
Yeah, these are great questions, Richard, and I hope I can do them justice. So, certainly the feedback has been phenomenal. And that gives me confidence because I'm always wanting to share what I'm doing, to see, like you said, it needs to make a difference. I want to make a difference. That's the whole point. I want to just pick up on the first thing you said, really, because, and then I'll try and answer the question, which is some years ago now, I realized that the reason it took me 8 years to produce this second book after Soul Story, whereas it used to take me weeks to do books when I was younger, was because it kept expanding. And one of the big areas of expansion, usually they came and I thought, oh, this won't take me long. I'll just say, I'll think this through and then I'll have something to say and that'll be enough. Was on epistemology. How do we know things? And it turned out to be huge for me and took a long time and is become very, very significant in this, to understand how we experience things and the role of ideas in that, and the role of ideas in that in the spiritual domain. Because there's a great naivety around epistemology in spirituality, which would have been absolutely true of me. So the idea there that you get commonly with the perennial philosophy is there's an experience, it's just given, it's self-revelation, it tells you what it is, and people have then thought about it in different ways. Rather than, no, the experience itself is a result of how you are sensing and making sense, or psi-sensing, I would say, and making sense for spiritual experience. That how you're categorizing something as this, not that, that if you can't do that, you won't experience it. Now, you're not doing it consciously. I'm separating everything here into this, not that, in the sensory world. I'm not doing it consciously. I could tell you, oh, that's the screen, that's the desk, but I'm not going screen, desk, I'm just doing it. And the same in the spiritual world. So quite often you don't know how you're doing it. You just have the experience. Often you feel the emotional response more than anything else to the experience. But to go, look, and then to realize that's what I've been doing all these years. I'd been coming in with, look at it like this, look at it like this, and helping people see, and then guiding people in meditation. Look at it like this, look at it like this. And then claiming they were just having a spontaneous experience, whereas actually I had led them into a way, now not maliciously and not bad, because often the experience was very good, and they were able to find something they would otherwise miss, like the oneness of everything. But it wasn't given. It wasn't just like, there, see, you just know. It's actually still a way of categorizing, because to know that it's oneness and not separateness, you need to be able to see the difference between those two, for instance, or God, or that when I say I experience God, then I must know that it's God and not something else that I'm experiencing, so that you see the role of categorization. Now, why that's so important is because it enables me to go, there is one epistemology which is being used by bacteria and me, or a shrew in a field is also looking to categorize their experience in a trustworthy way. Truth, for me, it means trustworthy. That's its etymological root. And it's doing it just to stay alive. I am also doing that, but I've extended it into the levels of soul. And I'm doing the same thing when I sense and sense the nature of reality. I'm looking for how best to sense and make sense of the universe on this level. And that's not given. So the ideas become absolutely essential. And you'll hear again and again, including from people like me in the past, this is beyond ideas, or you're now in another domain which this doesn't apply, and all of that sort of thing. And I think it's fundamentally wrong. So coming back to your question, what that does is it really goes, okay, so when I shift my way of ideating, it shifts my experience. And bringing myself back to, I'm not something else that I need to escape Tim from to get to. My project, as part of this evolving universe, is to become a more emergent me. Not to try and be like somebody else, not to emulate some saint or sage or the guru, but to take what this particular human being in relationship with the universe on this journey through life, and then I think beyond life into death, to find the best I can do with that. So it really roots it back so much in the individual. And for me, the idea of the univigil, reason I chose that name, is to go, a univigil is the awakened, enlightened one, is not something which disappears off and is seen through the illusion of Maya and seen through the illusion of the self and has no personal attachments or desires or any of that. It's the opposite. It's that the individual is the foundation for maturing into an individual who's actually in communion with the whole universe and is then doing their best to learn how to express the love that arises wisely in their individual relationships with their individual life and the people in it and their own aspirations and their own family and all those things that make you human. And then the last thing, which is huge for me, with this new return of God, if that's not too difficult a word for some people, it is, something greater, a communion, that souls come together to form this higher level, just like cells have come together to form a multicellular organism, so our psyches come together to form a greater intelligence. The intuition which I have with that is that what I bring to that is Tim. That just like, to use a crass analogy, if we took all our computers and we plugged them in and made a supercomputer, what you'd bring to the supercomputer is everything on your computer. And that's what we're doing. So that rather than being a denial of the self, the erasing of the self, the drop dissolving back into the ocean from whence it came, all of that, all that negative view, it goes, no, your evolution as you is it. And what you bring to that is for you, it's for the world, but it's also for God. It's the thing that you bring to the thing that's greater than you.
I'm just curious, hearing you talk there about the concepts we bring to it inform what we see. I wonder, over the whole time you've been involved in this world, how your view on that has shifted between, to what extent are we touching an objective reality in meditative mystical experience, and to what extent are we seeing that through certain filters? So, I recall you talking even 20 years ago about how the different religions seem to give rise to different spins on what is being contacted. So Christianity, the mystics go in and come back talking about love, or in Buddhism they might go in and come back talking about a great emptiness, or Taoism there's this immense stillness. And it seems to be, like the men touching different parts of the elephant, and whether there's an entire elephant there objectively. And I have been struck over my own time in this that my experiences, my sort of deeper experiences, lined up very strongly with the philosophical positions I held. Okay, so my initial transcendent ego dissolving experience into what felt like an oceanic state of love was just very, very Advaita. I was very into Advaita and the self-inquiry process, and then it felt like either, well, the Americans won't get this, but you know that that stuff they have, Ron Seal, where the advert is, it does exactly what it says on the tin. I came back and it's like, wow, this is like the spiritual kind of Ron Seal. It's just like this self-inquiry method. It's like, yes, you say, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the witnessing, I'm beyond all these things, and then it all opens up. It's like so. Then I thought, well, to what extent have I colored that? And it's very hard to see. And even more recently, I've done psilocybin experiences where it's been, on the one hand, felt like so much like touching something beyond myself, in that it's, I know the difference between like internal creativity arising and hearing something from somebody else. And it's very much like hearing something from somebody else and touching something that is so much more immense than I could conceptualize. And at the same time, the whole experience also feels like, well, yeah, this is exactly what I imagine the universe to be like. It's almost like a little bit too much like me. It's a bit disturbingly like me. So either I've got it all right, or I'm coloring the experience of my concepts in some way. And I don't know where to land on that. And I don't know what to make of, apparently neo-Nazis do psilocybin trips, and they have their sort of neo-Nazi experience from it. I haven't read too much into that, but I'm quite intrigued by it. So to what extent, I suppose I'm asking to what extent you think you're meeting your own concepts, you're meeting something objective, and also how your perspective on that might have changed over time. I would imagine, like most people, you started out feeling that you're meeting something very objective and you're not really coloring that experience. And then there's been a shift. Would that be the case?
Yes. But what I would say is more general. What I love about the thing that I'm playing with at the moment, Richard, is it goes, this thing I'm experiencing, it's a more emergent level of what was happening on other levels. So you look at what's happening in biology and you'll probably see what's happening on the level of the soul. It's just on the soul, it's more emergent, even down into matter. So I would say that the whole nature of reality is relational. That it is really the one as different forms in relationship with itself in all these different forms. So if I look at what I'm experiencing right now in the sensory world, forget spirituality, it's the meeting of me with these particular eyes. Right? It just changed it. If I do that, now it's different because of these particular eyes. The colors I can perceive, the things I can't perceive, I don't see. And the world is the meeting of me and what is there. Is there something there? For sure. Am I seeing what is there? Yes, but I'm seeing it in the way that I can. And the way that I'm seeing it is there's both all the categories that are happening on the on the instinctual level, which is enabling me to get this sense of it. And then on top of that, there's a whole load of ideational stuff, so that I don't just see the computer and go, it's a squarish and it's various colors. I know it's a computer, what it does. There's a whole load of other categories going on. So I bring in the cat, they don't see any of that. They would see some of it, the instinctual stuff. They wouldn't see what it does. If there was a bat in the room, they'd have a completely different sensory experience of the room. Everything is relational. And then that goes on to the spiritual level, exactly the same. So my way of ideating, of psi sensing, using that ability to sense things beyond the biological senses, is what I'm doing. I'm sensing it with my soul. The thing I've come to is that the best way to understand the psyche is as the evolution of another sense. It's another way that the system learns to discern the nature of the universe. And it's doing that. It arises to begin with that the system can discern its own processing. So now it's not just the world, it's itself, the actual processing. It can make that conscious. It can process that in high definition, improve it. And then from that, it's able to sense, I think, potentially anything. So that a whole load of phenomena, from mystical experiences of oneness and God to psychic experiences, far seeing, all sorts of stuff, are all the emergence in a very uneven way, I think, of our ability to sense with the psyche. and that the way we experience seeing is with these colors and shapes. The way we're experiencing listening is with these timbres and velocities and tonality. And the way we experience sight sensing is with images. Images meaning copies, not just visual images, also audio images. Thinking is an audio image. You speak to yourself, except you're not speaking, you're imagining it. Dreams, psychedelic visions. What are you then it's like, well, what are you sight sensing? Well, when I sight sense myself, is me. But when I sight sense, when I have a ayahuasca or a psilocybin experience, I think I'm stepping way out from that. And I think what people are experiencing in near-death experiences is whole soulscapes, if you like, where they're actually connecting with an objective psyche. Because part of what I want to suggest is that just as biology evolved into an ecology, it wasn't just individual systems, the psyche is an ecology. It's all these different psyches interrelating. And so we can look within ourselves, and that's purely individual, and sight sense ourselves, but we can sight sense each other. And we can sight sense the whole domain, the bardos, if you like. So, but it's always us though. I can only sense sight sense. I can only sense on the biological level with the categories that I've got. I can't sense like a bat does. And on the level of the psyche, the same. I can only sense it with the ideas I've got, which is why you change the ideas, you change the experience. Doesn't mean you just made it up, though. It just means that that's a new way that you can categorize the nature. It's a new way of discerning what's there.
Okay, I'd like to loop back around and talk a little bit about the ICU before we conclude, because I think people might be interested to join that as the pod book comes out and these ideas are released on a weekly basis. There's going to be a new video dropping.
At least one a week. To begin with, there'll be two.
So I'm wondering about like the challenge of running a group, a collective, when you're advancing ideas. Okay, in that these are very challenging philosophical concepts. Okay, and you made a shift from being in a kind of idealist place at one point and through to the soul story years to this emergent philosophy. How do you find running a group when people are probably you want to focus on a set of ideas, but then people are coming in with a diverse array of ideas? I'm sort of asking about the challenge of managing diversity when there's a kind of like directionality to the group too, and how do you sort of manage that there with that kind of challenge in a way that's engaging for everyone then to be a part of this community?
That's a really fantastic question, and it is an interesting situation. I have it at retreats as well. I have it in my life generally, and I understand why that's helpful. And because I put forward an idea, and people need to take a particular idea. They haven't got the whole thing. That's what I'm hoping will be the difference with the pod book, because then people can just listen. It's free, and if they take the journey, just to the first 17 chapters, they will have made the journey of getting the essence of it. They can see how it fits together. Because what generally happens to begin with is you say, oh, I think God's emergent. I think God's where the universe is flowering into God. And they get that idea and think, oh, I quite like that. That makes sense to me. And then they say, oh, and it's like this. And then it's not like that. So you're discovering your true self then. It's like, no true selves and all of that. So people naturally put it into the ideational network they already have. That's inevitable. I do that with everything as well. So for me, then it's the patience to go, okay, but what I'm actually suggesting something which is such a fundamental shift. It won't fit with a lot of things which you've seen around spirituality before. And in that way, I'm not comparing it, but just in terms of like getting the paradigm shift, you can see it's like comparing relativity physics with classical physics. It's like, no, you have to make a fundamental shift in how you see physics to get this. Is this still useful? Yeah, it's fine. But this is a fundamental shift. And what I'm hoping the pod book will help with that. We meet up every week, so I get to repeat things. And what's lovely is that people who come enjoy it. And it's playful. And, I find a way to go, yeah, not that, I don't think, but I do also really believe in respecting each other. So, you know, a bit like you, I love you and respect you. Even, you know, you said, well, I've had that whole conversation, Tim, but I still think idealism's the way and you're onto a dead end. It's like, well, I'm interested because you're a thoughtful, awake, loving human being. So that respect thing is key. And then we can share ideas, and it enables me to constantly see how can I reshape. I have to go through the process I've been with myself with other people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I notice myself doing a group with you, like a in-person weekend group last September time. My perceptions of what I'm doing shift continuously. So in between the last time I did one a few years back, and then this one, I probably read quite a bit about evolutionary psychology and different things. So my concept of who I am and what it is to be human has shifted in some ways. And when I'm sitting down engaging in these exercises, there is a movement, like a process of reflecting on what am I doing? What is this Advaita thing? Is it true? Is it not true? What aspects do I take for granted in it? And it's that reflectiveness that I think really appeals to me. So it's not kind of a dead philosophy living in my mind somewhere that I just adhere to this ideology, but it's a shifting, moving thing, and it's quite a lot too, right? Because these questions of reflecting on the essence of one's consciousness, like looking at the thing that's looking, is inherently a difficult thing to look at. So I think it takes a long time for that to play out. So yeah, it's interesting that there is this. You've created a kind of reflective space about the kind of spiritual traditions, which I suppose isn't common. Because I think in most spiritual groups, it's the philosophy is kind of set, and then it's a case of doing it.
Yes, yes, you nailed it again. That's it. It's that the way that I've set this up is I'm working on something. I'm going to share things that may be a bit half-baked because I'm heading towards this pod book. Please bear with me. Tell me what worked. Tell me what didn't work. Let's discuss it. And I'll come back often and go, right, I've thought about that, and I want to say it like this now. And and so we're engaged in a process together, and that's not just an affectation, because that is actually what I'm doing. The people that come actually help me develop this, but also the thing that you said. It's like the whole model of the past has been, spirituality is very old, as you know, and so a lot of it comes from a collectivist period in our evolution, which is about maintaining tradition and authority. So that you have an authority figure, they got it from the previous authority figure, they tell you the way it is, you practice it, and your job is to come into the place that the originator or the guru, wherever it was, inhabits. What I'm suggesting is much more individualistic and creative. So I'm saying, look, the whole universe is a creative process of individuating. Be creative. So the thing that the way that you come into this and the bits that really seem important to you may not be the bits that the way I come into this or what's important to me. And that's absolutely fine, because you don't have to be like me. There's one of me, that's enough. You have to be like you. So that there's a great emphasis on taking ideas that seem important, and you may not give a damn about this side of it, and that's all right, that's fine. My thing is I want to have an expansive thing because that's what I want to bring, but that acknowledging of the creativity and of the individuality, I think, enables people to sit there and take the bits they go, I really love that, and I don't really understand that, but it's fine, and there's room for that. There's room for that, and in the practices as well. And that's a big shift. If I look at my journey, you know me quite well, and my whole life, all my 66 almost years, have been intensely creative. I don't know why. It's just I've created so much music before books, and then events, and it's like it's my nature. But when I started spirituality through my 20s, I thought that was all in the way. I thought creativity was a bad thing because it was an ego trip, and that I really should just be sitting in meditation and getting away, or just giving myself to God, or just becoming a monk, and followed that as well for periods. And whereas now it feels like, no, what's crazy? You don't need your creativity to be like mine. but bring that ability to the whole universe has evolved because of new things. So throwing up new things and having the wisdom to try and discern which is the good new thing and which is the bad new thing, individually and collectively, is what we need to do. And that applies just as much to spirituality as it does to anything else.
Thank you, Tim. I've asked exactly none of the questions I wrote down to ask, so I think that means we'll have to do this again. But I think that's, again, I've reached the limit of metaphysics. It's spilling out of my mind now. So I think we'll call it there for today. And we can do this again with the questions I yet haven't asked, and also with reflections on the book as it emerges.
I'd love that. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. I love your incisiveness and your clarity and wisdom.